Just a heads up, this video does contain spoilers for the new raid, Defiler of the Just. So if this new raid is something you want to experience for yourself first time through, I recommend you turn off this video now and rewatch it after you've run the content, whether that's on the live servers or on the preview server Lamania. Hey, what's going on DDO players? Axel here. In this video, I'll be talking about the new raid, Defiler of the Just, which I did have a chance to run on Lamania yesterday, and I ended up running it 4 times actually. And in this video, I'm going to give my thoughts on the raid, what I thought about it, if I liked it, if I didn't like it. I'm going to try not to get too spoilery in case someone listening to this has not run it before, but I am going to discuss some of the mechanics of the raid. Let's start with the difficulties. I actually ran this on every difficulty. I ran it on normal twice, on epic hard and epic elite once. Yesterday when I went to start in the raid, I said, hey, you know what, I'm going to jump in on epic normal by myself, see how far I can get. One thing that I did find is that epic normal, the trash mob DPS is really not bad at all. You actually could solo this without too much of a problem. If it were not for one of the raid mechanics, it's an auto-fail condition. You have to rescue several of the angels, and if you don't rescue them in time, you will fail the raid. Now, I've only run it, like I said, 4 times, so I'm by no means an expert on this raid, so I might say a few things in this video that aren't actually correct. If I'm wrong in anything, please correct me. Definitely not claiming to be an expert on this raid yet. But as far as the trash mob DPS, that's one of the things I really did not like about the raid. I'll get to some things I liked in a minute, but let's start with some things I didn't like, and trash mob DPS was one. At one point, I was in the middle of the raid, and I was pulling every single aggro of every trash mob in the quest, and I still wasn't taking that much damage. Like, I probably had up to 10, 15 mobs on me at once, all these being red named. And I still wasn't that concerned about the damage I was taking. Like, I was still not all the way healing with my aura, but a lot of the way. I was keeping my health full with the aura. I don't like this. I think the DPS needs to be higher for these trash mobs at epic normal. This is my opinion. This is a raid. This is an endgame raid, and I know it's epic normal, but even on epic normal, it should not be a breeze to solo it. Now, I'm not a master at all of this raid yet, and when I get these spawn mechanics down for the NPCs you have to protect, it might, if there's a way to get to them, multiple angels at once, to protect them from getting killed. Like I said, if a certain number of angels get killed, you auto-fail the raid. If there's a way to get to these angels solo, then this raid will not be difficult at all to solo. If it weren't for this auto-fail condition, like you could, like most builds, I think, well, maybe not most, but a good portion of builds could definitely solo this with not too much of an issue on epic normal, because the trash mob DPS is not that bad. Now, one thing that I really liked about this raid, kind of switching mechanics here, I know I said I was going to, or switching topics here, I know I said I was going to talk a little bit about things I didn't like, but since I'm kind of thinking about damage here, one thing I did like is the blades, sort of like the Shroud. All kinds of blades are running around this quest, and they are this exact same as the Shroud blades in part 3, part 4 of the Shroud. And the damage is quite high. Now, when I was running this on Lamania yesterday, and the footage you're watching is actually me running with a dev, Cookie Kobold was actually in our group, and as I was running this, I was giving them feedback. But the blade damage is really high right now. On Epic Normal, it was doing about 450 to me, and that's a kind of a higher PRR tune. If you don't have any PRR, it's probably going to hit you for 900, but that is not working as intended. The developers actually said the blade damage is swapped from heroic and epic right now, so I actually don't have much of an idea of the blade damage, but I do hope that the blade damage in that quest is something around 200 for epic normal, 300 for epic hard, and 450 for epic elite. I like the idea of the blades running around the quest. It makes it so you have to pay attention. You have to be on your toes a little bit, because if you get caught with a blade, then you're going to be dead in like two hits or 3 hits. And I like that. You should have to pay attention in a raid. The blades aren't really around the trash fighting areas, except for at the beginning. But throughout most of the raid, they're really not an issue as far as being in the middle of a mob fight. Like they're not something you can't avoid. It's just a mechanic that kind of makes you have to pay attention, and I like that. One of the other things I did not like, there's actually a gather mechanic at the beginning of the quest. Not about 3 or 4 minutes in, you have to gather the whole party at the beginning of a gate to get through. And in our run, we actually had, well, actually it was the epic hard run, I believe. We had someone go AFK at the beginning of the quest, and because of that, we couldn't we couldn't keep going in the raid. We were stalled. I don't like this gather mechanic because, like I said, it gives one person the power to halt this raid. That's not good. Now, one thought I had is that gather mechanic might be there for lag reasons. And if that's the case, if it's there for performance reasons, then okay, I can accept it. They might not want certain party members aggroing trash at the beginning of the raid at the same time as people are aggroing trash in the middle or end parts of the raid, and because that can cause performance issues and lag. So if that mechanic is there to prevent that, that's fine. If it's not there, then take it out. One problem with the raid that a lot of casters pointed out is I believe every single trash mob is red named. And what does that mean? That means that DC casters are completely useless because red names are immune to most all DC spells. Um, there were evoker favorite soul. There was an evoker favorite soul in there that couldn't. He was complaining because he couldn't do anything because every mob was immune to every DC spell he had, and if there's Pale Masters or Evocation Spec Wizards, whatever, they're not going to be able to do anything because all the mobs are immune to them. So, really, all the DC casters are regulated to doing is like throwing damage spells, which they aren't that good at. The favorite soul in the group specifically was complaining that all he could do was chug pots and throw not harm. What's the epic spell? Not Hellball, Ruin. He was complaining that all he could do in the raid was cast Ruin and chug SP pots. I think they need to address that. There should be. It's fine if you want to make some of the mobs red names, but some of the mobs need to not be named, just so that DC casters have a role. You should be able to crowd control some of the monsters with DC spells. Maybe Finger of Death some of the monsters. I wouldn't want the saves to be too low. But if you're spec'd for Necro and you have past lives and stuff, yeah, you should be able to finger some of those mobs. One thing specifically I did not like about the raid is there's no roles needed in this raid. There's no healer role, there's no tank role needed, there's no crowd control role needed. It's just straight DPS, and that's an issue. I think for a raid, not regular quests. Regular quests, fine, make them so you can solo. But when it comes to a raid, that's a party. That's a party experience. We should have some kind of roles. I'm not saying that you need to make it required that you have a dedicated healer, healing cleric, CC wizard, etc. in there, but there should be some kind of roles in there. There should be a way to crowd control the trash per se, for example, and make that useful. There should be a way of some kind of mechanic for a tank, possibly. It doesn't there don't have to be a tank needed in every raid, but one idea that I kind of threw out in my feedback to the developers, this wasn't live on the servers, I actually posted this on the Lamania forums, is let's make a couple of the red names special mini bosses, perhaps, that spawn. Let's make them perhaps something that's a very high DPS, so that you're actually going to want to tank that mob. Maybe make the mob respawn if it's killed. That gives you an incentive to not kill it. Make it so there's something that has to be tanked. And I thought it would be cool, and I've thrown out this idea before. Give that mob, say, a anti-healing aura or an intercession aura, kind of like the Death Knights have in Mark of Death, that prevents healing. That way the tank can't heal themselves, and that means the raid would need a healer role. Something like that. Now, they don't have to do it exactly like that. That's just an idea I threw out there. I would like to see, in a raid, I'd like to see there be a crowd control role, a tanking role, and a healing role in raids. I really don't think that's too much to ask, and I don't think that's crazy talk. Like, this is a raid. It should be a party experience. All the quests soloable that you want, but when it comes to a raid, I think there should be some party coordination involved. And a mechanic like that wouldn't mean that you gotta wait for a cleric or you gotta wait for a wizard, whatever. Um, you could maybe, with the example I had, have a rogue heal scroll the tank, whatever. It wouldn't mean you have to have a certain role. It would mean that a certain class required. It would mean just that you would have a role required, and there's probably many classes that could fill each role. There's Pale Masters that can tank. There's, of course, Paladins, Fighters that can tank, but there's probably people of any class that can tank, and there's probably there's also many classes that are capable of filling a healer role. Druids, Bards, Clerics, Favored Souls. Probably do it with some other classes too. So let's have roles, not required classes, but let's have required roles. At least in the higher difficulties, at least in Epic Elite. When it came to the length of the raid, I was also a little disappointed. I didn't like that. It's a short raid. It lasts, you could get it done in like 10, 15 minutes. Probably on Epic Normal, a little bit lower than that, although you wouldn't be able to get it much lower since a lot of the raid involves, it's kind of on a set clock because you're waiting for angels to respawn. There's also a mechanic in the raid that splits up your party. So these angels will spawn at different parts of the map. So in order to make sure you get to them in time, if you don't get to them in time, they will actually be killed by a devil. So you want to make sure you get to the angels in time, and to make sure you can do that, you're going to want to split up your party and send, say, half to the north, half to the south. That way you can kind of have the whole map covered and be watching for angels that way. But the length itself, like I said, lasts like 10, 15 minutes. Okay, now the infight, I can't give much of an opinion on because the infight, the complete infight is not on Lamania yet, so I don't know what it is. The infight I was disappointed with at first, but then I read from the developer that it's not complete yet, so when they do update Lamania with the full infight, I'll be able to give input on that. I'll probably try to run it once more on Lamania this weekend if they get the new build up. If not, then I probably won't. And overall, yeah, the raid is definitely a little too easy. I didn't like that about it. Epic Normal, I was able to 4-man pretty darn easily. The main thing with the raid is the trash isn't hard at all. It's mainly you just don't want to get hit by one of the autofill conditions. Even though the splitting up of the party to find the angels doesn't require rolls like I like it to in a raid, it's still a mechanic that I thought was pretty interesting. You have to pay attention a little bit, especially with the blades out there. You got to find the NPCs, and if you aren't really paying attention and looking for the NPCs, you're going to fail. So I like that about it. But overall, my reaction to the raid is a little mixed. I don't want to sound too negative here because I actually enjoy this raid more than like Mark of Death, more than Fire Peaks, definitely. So it's okay. Like, I'm not that disappointed, and I definitely want to run it a little more and experience the full infight before I give my complete opinion. And whenever I do my update 27 review video, I'll give my full opinion at that time. But I feel okay about it. I'm not too upset about it. I wish it would have been longer. The content pack as a whole feels a little light to me. The 3 quests are short and the raid's short, and since we're only getting content like 4 times a year, I really expect more than that from the content. You could actually run all this content if you know what you're doing, probably in an hour, maybe a little longer. I'm talking about all 3 quests and the raid. And as I mentioned before, the raid is a little too short and simple. No rolls are required. It's pretty much a straight beatdown, pretty much a straight DPS beatdown. You really don't have any need for much party thought or organization beyond splitting up the party to find the Archons. So hopefully I can see the infight, and that makes the raid a little more climactic. A lot of players are giving them feedback on the Lamania forums about this. I'll link that in the description if you want to go there and give your input if you've run this raid on Lamania. And if you feel like I do, or if there's anything you're not happy about with the raid, I would recommend you go into the Lamania forums. There's an official feedback thread, which I'll also post below in the description, where you can give your feedback on this raid. So if there's anything you liked or didn't like about this raid, I encourage you to give your feedback there. As always, guys, thanks for listening. Please give me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.